Good evening and welcome to this webinar hosting refugees and asylum seekers, 4 models, inspiring stories told about walking and love in action. So I am Sally Craig Christensen, and I am a member of the Sanctuary Task Force. And as that, I will be moderating. I am also a member of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church and the St. Andrew's Pentecost St. Matthew's Partnership. Before we get started, I'm going to make a short list of logistics for this webinar to share with you. I want to give most of the time to the wonderful stories that people are going to be telling and hearing and listening to. So first, this is being recorded. Second, there is Spanish interpretation available. You'll see at the bottom of your screen a little globe, and that is where you click to choose your preferred language. Third, we have both an opening and a closing prayer, and then the presentations will begin. Now, the presenters of those presentations, I'll give you just a brief little description bio in order. The first presentation will be done by Brian and Wendy Carson, who are members of the Congregation Civic Chicago. And they are also in the Sanctuary Working Group, which is part of the Chicago Religious Leadership Network. They have been working with asylum seekers. Second is Linda Ragozo. She is a congregant at St. John Episcopal Church, Chicago, and she will be talking about her hosting of a family beginning last March. You're going to be hearing stories of people who have worked for several years with asylum seekers or refugees and ones that have just begun. The third group will be Cynthia Doucette from St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, Evanston, and Ngozi Osuji from St. Andrew's Pentecost, and both, of course, of the St. Andrew's Pentecost St. Matthew's Partnership. And they will be speaking about a co-sponsorship with Refugee One, working with refugees. Our fourth one will be from Reverend Gary Cox, who is the vicar at St. Teresa de Avila Episcopal Church in Chicago, and also serves as pastor of Calvary Lutheran Church. And he is on the Diocese Anti-Racism Commission and Sanctuary Task Force. And Reverend Sandra Castillo, assisting priest at Santa Teresa, and also the current chairperson of the Sanctuary Task Force. So that is the rundown of the presentations. After that, we will have our question and answer and hopefully discussion period. You can enter all of your questions in the chat, and please say if you want it directed to a certain person, certain panelist or not. If it's direct, then we will offer it up in general to whoever would like to take that question. You'll also have an opportunity when we're in the question and answer period to raise your hand. And you do that by clicking on the reactions logo at the bottom of your screen, and raise your hand will be one of the options there. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Sandra to please offer up our opening prayer.
Thank you, Craig. This prayer is authored by Jesuit Father Dan Hartnett, and it's entitled, "Give Us Hearts." Let us pray. God of love and compassion, may we always recognize your spirit in the refugee family seeking safety from violence, in the migrant worker bringing food to our tables, in the asylum seekers seeking justice for their families, in the unaccompanied child traveling in a dangerous world. Give us hearts that break open whenever our brothers and sisters turn to us. Give us hearts that no longer turn deaf to their voices in times of need. Give us eyes to recognize a moment of grace instead of a threat. Give us voices that fail to remain silent, but which decide instead to advocate prophetically. Give us hands that reach out in welcome, but also in work for a world of justice until all homelands are safe and secure. Bless us, O Lord. Amen.
And now Wendy and Brian Parson.
Hello, everybody. Just thank you all for being here today, and we're going to try to share a little bit of the experiences that we've had, and also a little bit about sanctuary in general. It's people talk about the migrant crisis right now, and yes, we are definitely in a time of great movements of people. This has not been the only time. There have been times throughout human history when people have had to move, give up their homes, give up their livelihoods, give up the lands that they used to that they lived on, and just excuse my talk, and walk out of that house with just what they're carrying on their back and move. It's happened. This has happened throughout history. It's something that's happening a lot now, and walking with the migrants is something that's the most important thing. Uh, just your own histories. If you look back at the early books in the Old Testament, I always like to say these are migration stories. And the rule that keeps popping up over and over again is that you do not persecute a migrant, you love a migrant, you need to accept migrants. And we do this simply because it's the right thing to do. There's no consequences offered, like many of the laws in the Old Testament. There's no consequences for not doing it. You do it because this is part of your life and it's part of everybody's life. And knowing that people will be on the move is just something that's going to be with us forever, I think. We started, we have 5 children and 6 grandchildren, and we started hosting people in our house, let's see, about 6 years ago. Well, we hosted people in our house before we were taking migrants in. There were always seemed to be a homeless person my wife would find, or a son or daughter that was going through or that was going through a crisis and had to move back in, or the children or friends that were going through crisis, and we helped them out for a while. About 7 years ago, back in 2017, we welcomed for the first time a family from El Salvador, a mother and son, and they stayed with us for about 7 months, 8 months, and it was actually, that was the most rocky experience that we had with migration, with holding migrants, but you live and get through that a lot. And I tried to counsel other people that want to get into that, are considering to do that thing of hosting migrants. You know, it used to be a century ago, this was just normal things that people would take the travelers with them, take them into their house, and these people would stay friends of theirs for life. And I like to say that all of us came to this country and would not have made it most likely without the help of a stranger. without meeting a stranger who came and assisted you. Tonight begins the Jewish holiday of Shavuos, and that's very similar to very similar to Pentecost. We just counted out 50 days to since Passover to get to Shavuos, the Feast of Weeks, and it's traditional to read the book of Ruth on that day. It's a wonderful story. It's a migration story, and the family has to drop and leave because of famine, just leave their family house, lands and go to another land, and lots of troubles happened, and all the men died and the women came back with a daughter-in-law. The mother and the daughter-in-law came back, and that's just about what happens. Some of the people that we've hosted, we've had a young woman from Ghana that was fleeing from a brutal marriage. She was her father sold her and to pay off debts to a man to be his third wife, and it was a brutal marriage, and she had to escape and made it to South America with the help of a family. Okay, help of a family, her family, and did the trek, just like the people from South America are doing now. It's a brutal trek, going through that Darien Pass, passing dead bodies every day. She said she just gave up and she sat down on the ground and said, "I'm not going to move any farther." And if it wasn't for a couple of Sikh men that she had met and were also on the trek that got her up and made her keep moving and walking, she would not have made it today. But she's now in college and out on her own. There's a young woman from Benin that we hosted for almost a year and a half that was trafficked to the United States. She did not come through the migrant route. She was brought here on an airplane under a pseudonym by traffickers and sold to a family here in Chicago. And after a few years, she was able to get away. And it's hard to believe that slavery happens here in Chicago also, but it does. We've hosted a trans woman from Guatemala that was here, and she had to trying to get to somewhere where she could live her life the way she wanted to. One night she just sat, and the story started flowing from her of what it was like on that trek. It was so brutal. And all you can do is sit and listen, and hopefully give some help. Nobody does this by themselves. Families that give help are usually and generally should be helped by other people. Uh, uh, we're helped by organizations that do case management, that help them get benefits, help them get their asylum papers if they're able to, and the congregations can come together and help a family that wants to do that too. It starts out being a bit of a monetary thing, bringing a family or a person into your house, and but after a couple of months, they're able to get SNAP benefits. Illinois is a very good state for getting cash benefits to migrant people, as long as they at least state that they're going to be applying for asylum. and can show that they're residing in the state of Illinois or in Chicago. And we've done that for a number of people. Help them get into school, and we've got a 17-year-old boy with us now with his parents. They're from Nigeria, but they actually fled Nigeria about 17 years ago and came to South America and to Brazil and lived in Sao Paulo for all that time. He had a restaurant, and their son was born in Brazil, but the gangs down there got very bad and were pushing them out. They couldn't afford to pay anybody anymore, and desperate, they had to pick up and leave. And that's usually a lot of what's happening. You know, the government wants you to apply for asylum in your country, and they said, we'll send people down there to help your applications. All the stories that we hear are people that have to walk out of their house in the middle of the night and go because they can't stay around. They're being pursued. That's how desperate situations can be. It's not just, oh, maybe I'd like to go to America and get some and find a better life. But yeah, that's it too. That's part of it. That's part of it. All that happens also. But the stories that we hear and the horrible things that people can do to one another is just, it's unreal. And I'm not going to take up much more time because I think we want to have a question and answer period later on, but I'm quite willing to answer people's questions about housing. We have I have a mezuzah on my wall here in the living room that has I put a little tag on it for everybody that has either come through our house. Even a lot of people have come through just overnight while the buses are waiting, trying to get the next bus, and it's almost full. So I might have to put up another. Mezuzah, but it's such a rewarding thing walking with the people, and it's, to me, there's no greater mitzvah than hospitality and showing care for the migrant, for the traveler. And I'm going to turn this back to Sally.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, it is heartwarming though to walk along someone in love and welcome our brothers and sisters who are coming to our country and to others. So now we're going to move on to Linda, and Linda has I believe a very inspiring story to tell. So Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Regoza, and I'll say I work from home full time, mostly from home. And we're in a family of 3. It's me, my grown daughter, and my granddaughter living here. And we are first-time hosters of a family from Ecuador, mom, dad, a 13-year-old boy, and 2 and 3-year-old girls. And they came over towards the end of March with us. And just a little background, my family had a house fire February 2022. And so we were displaced ourselves. We stayed on couches in a hotel, and then we got an apartment for a year, and then an Airbnb to cover the last period of time. And then, we got to go home. And when we got to the apartment, we left our home we each had a bag of clothes, and that was it. So we entered an empty apartment, and I sent an email to the church, to St. John's Episcopal, and a couple friends that I know. And within 2 weeks, people donated clothes and furniture to us. So we were fully furnished. We had insurance, but the money doesn't come through right away. So we were just in an empty house sitting on the floor at first. So everybody came through and we were taken care of. And then fast forward like 13 months later, our home has has been it's been restored. And so we move home, and our family situation changed. We had one person move out, and my brother passed away from the fire. So moving back in was just me, my daughter, and granddaughter. And it's a big single family home, and I hang out on the second floor, and my daughter and granddaughter in the basement. Common area, the kitchen is on the first floor, and there were 2 empty bedrooms. And seeing 2 empty bedrooms, it was just so wasteful. So I knew somebody's going to fill those rooms. I just knew it was just going to be a matter of time. So and it was, because within 2 weeks, I saw an email from the church that I infrequently attended. But I read their emails, and I got the email, and it said that they were paying rent. They were paying for a hotel for a family for a few days, and asked if anyone had space for them. So I said that we did. And I actually talked to Brian, who just spoke previously. He gave me a little, some pointers, some tips on being a first-time hoster of a family, which was very helpful. And when they came in, and a lot of the things that we had lost from the fire, they actually were able to salvage them, and the construction company returned them to us. So we ended up with doubles of things. We had twice as many TVs as we needed, twice as many clothes, because we bought clothes throughout the year, and dressers. And so that was good, because we had a lot to share, but we didn't have beds for the people coming to stay with us. But I had a sectional sofa, which I knew was going to be terrible to sleep on, because you lay down on it and one end moves this way, the other moves that way. But I did the same thing as I had done when I needed help before. I emailed the church, told a couple friends, and again, within a couple weeks, everything was taken care of. People stepped up, and they gave us beds and clothing and toys and everything that was needed. And I'll say, I asked the family just a couple days ago, what else do you need? Where might we be falling short? And they said they have everything that they need. They'd like a job and some, cash, but they have everything that they need. They have all the clothes, the food, everything. So everything worked out like that. And I had a friend who hooked me up with through the teachers union. There's a Facebook group that helps immigrants. And they actually have people assigned. Like, I contacted one guy who's in charge of bicycles. And I said, well, we'd like 2 bikes for the dad and the 13-year-old son. And he gave us 2 bikes. There's somebody else in charge of sewing machines. So if I need a sewing machine for the asylum seekers, I can call her. Somebody else, a couple people are in charge of a free store. So I got in contact with them. So the family was able to go through the free store. And they've made their own connections. So they don't really need me to take care of them so much. They're pretty self-sufficient. We're just sharing a home, and I help them out, here and there as I can, as they need. I'll say we have a language barrier. They speak Quichua, which I think is Mayan, according to Google, but they speak Spanish as a second language, which I don't. But we're using translation apps, and we're meeting between Spanish and English translations. And sometimes we rely on photos from the cell phone. Like the boy had a drink, and he asked what it was, and I told him it was a dragon fruit. And I tried to interpret it. I'm like, okay, I think that's dragon fruta. And that helped nothing. That did not give him a clue what he was drinking. So then I was able to show him a photo. I just looked up an image. So we make things work like that. And I did spend some money at the beginning, because I took the family to secondhand stores to buy some clothes like the day after they arrived, before I knew about the resources that were out there. But I'll tell you, at this point, I'm not spending any extra money. I'm probably saving money with this family, because I like to order out a lot. And the mom here cooks every day. She makes usually soup, and she brings me food every day. So she's taking care of me. So I'm probably getting healthier, and I'm saving money, which is, that's good. We find ways to, be entertained. We're really lucky in Chicago, because we've been able to go to the park district. We were going swimming twice a week at the swimming pool there. We've been to the zoo, we go to the park all the time, and you know, we have a lot of these opportunities. We don't have to spend it, and it is a lot of fun. And I appreciate having somebody to go with, you know. So, and let's see, I'll tell you about the son. The family's very grateful. Like, you know, I said the mom's always taking care of me. The son, if he sees me carrying something, he like rushes over to take it from me. You know, they just want to help. They want to show their gratitude. And the girls who are 2 and 3, the laughter is wonderful. I love playing with them. They're the cutest things. They look like twins. Another good thing is if I hear one of them crying, I have the option of not doing anything because they have a mom and she knows what to do. So it's not a big time commitment either. So we have the space. I said from the beginning, I don't have a lot of time to help these people, but I can give them a room, you know. I give them 2 rooms, but they don't eat up my time at all. And I just want to wrap it up. You may have heard the story, because we hear that, you know, there's so many people coming in right now. There's so many people who need help, who need housing. And there's a story about 2 guys, I think, walking along a beach, and there's a whole bunch of starfish that washed ashore. And so the first guy picks one up and he throws it into the ocean, and they keep walking. He bends down, he picks up another one, throws it into the ocean. And the second guy is like, you know, you're not making a difference. You know, look at all the other ones you didn't pick up. And so the first guy picks up a starfish and he throws it into the ocean, and he says, I made a difference with that one. Yeah. And I think that's what I want to do. I think that's what we're supposed to do. If we can help, don't be overwhelmed by the big problem. You know, we can't change the laws and everything like that, put in our votes, and then that's it. But we can make changes to help at least, you know, 1 person, 2 people. And if you have the space, there's resources out there, and we can help you get together with those resources. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. What a wonderful story of the joy that's been given to you, as well as the joy you've given others. Thank you so much for your work. And now we're going to move on to Cynthia and Ngozi, who will be speaking about the efforts that that team has been making.
Okay, you can see my screen, Craig. We're set. Okay, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, Linda, Wendy, Brian, I so admire the work that you guys have done with asylum seekers. We were asked to join this panel tonight to give a slightly different angle. We were a partnership, as everyone mentioned, St. Andrew's Pentecost and St. Matthew's, 2 Episcopal churches in Evanston. And together, we decided to look outside of ourselves more. We started this partnership in 2017, and at the top of this screen is kind of what we're trying to do, welcoming all in community, joyfully doing God's work in the world. So get into this partnership. Again, we started in 2017. We wanted to build community, fellowship, and friendships just came along just so wonderfully. We started monthly meetings, and a lot of people have asked us since how we ended up starting. What are the logistics around doing something like this to try to help? We decided immigrants and refugees would be our focus. And so we did educational, some seminars. We worked with Episcopal Migration Ministries, some book author discussions, some financial help for DACA processing fees, some advocacy. But these are all kind of secondary down the road. It's not nearly the kind of focus that we've heard so far with actually welcoming a family. We weren't sure if we had critical mass to support a family. But love is an action. We hear about it a lot in the sermons and the people that we admire. And so we decided to look into the idea of Refugee One co-sponsorship. And this was a couple of years ago, before the busloads of asylum seekers started coming, where it's really big now. And we decided to co-sponsor with Refugee One. And those of you maybe new to the definition, refugees may come here for, in fact, I'll read the UN definition. It's very similar to asylum seekers, if not the same. Someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. But the process is slightly different. There's the refugee resettlement process, can be international. People apply for it in the screening process in their own country. And then a very small percentage, just 1% or so, gets a referral for resettlement to a third country like the United States. Refugee One is one of the groups in Chicago that is part of this facilitation process. And the co-sponsorship role, and we learned a lot about this then trying to decide if we had, call it critical mass to do this. Our role was to, number one, make a home. So this is building an apartment, furnishing it, getting everything ready for a refugee family. And it can take, Kelly Wendt, our contact at Refugee One, 20 plus years from the time they flee their country till the time they actually get established in the resettlement country, and very often over 10 years. So it's a long process. It's not the same as asylum seekers in that way. Then you raise support. So there is an upfront kind of, you help Refugee One fund the process. Actually, it costs a little more than this to do it end to end for them. So we were fortunate to have a grant available, a mission-based grant. So you may want to look at something like that if it's something your church or your group wants to do. And then this very important one, which you'll hear about more from Ngozi and maybe her daughter Chichi, be a friend. It's a 6-month commitment every week, going to visit with the family, where you're walking alongside them, learning about their culture. They learn about ours. There's so much interaction. It was just amazing. And you'll hear more. Behind the scenes, Refugee One did a lot of the things that we weren't yet prepared to do. They identified the family, matched the family with co-sponsors, meaning our team. They find the apartment, they set up the utilities, the financial aid to help the family get on their feet, help with transitioning, legal paperwork, schools for the kids, medical appointments, work permits, and they facilitated interviews. So a lot of this was done, things that we actually didn't have the skills or background necessarily to do, or call it critical mass. So it was a really good, the co-sponsorship, we felt, at least for us, it was a really good match. And then according to their documentation, 95% of the clients that come through, and it's quite a large number, with a staff of just really wonderful people. 95% of their refugee clients are fully self-reliant within 12 months of arrival. So they're in an apartment, the kids are in school, the people who are, the family members who are working are able to support them. So it's just kind of an amazing group. We have a ton of people to thank that came together. So we have critical mass. People came out of the woodwork from both of our churches, plus other churches. We have a friend who's a Catholic nun, and her order, the Poor Handmaids of Jesus Christ, they came, all sorts of people donated. We have neighbors who are from Afghanistan who offered, if the family we were matched with, to be translators. It's just, this is an amazing group. So we started out with 12 people. We ended up with 40 on an active team, 9 teams that I can talk about a little later if we have time. A group that did the apartment furnishing, a group that did the welcoming day for the airport, and so on. And it would cross congregations, cross faiths. We made amazing new friends, and more than 100 people donated items for the apartment. So where you feel like you might be alone, it's amazing. Across faiths, across communities, it's been really a blessing to do this. So back to the preparations, we started in 2021 with the application process, working with Refugee One, understanding everything. So once we were accepted, we started these boxes, we found a storage space in one of the churches to get ready. The Refugee One found the apartment. We had training. They do cultural awareness training and some other things to make sure that we are successful with walking alongside the family. This is Sister Rosemary, who crocheted. I mean, people just came together. What do I have that I can participate with and join us? And the doll here, it also has an amazing story. There's a woman, Selena Dere Aoleye, and she is a Chicago area, really an amazing woman who directs a program, and she makes these dolls that highlight African heritage and African American heritage. And then one of our team members, Myra from St. Luke's, another Episcopal church, sewed the outfit. So they're just amazing. We got the apartment ready June 7th. 2022, the family we were matched with arrived at O'Hare, and it was a mother and 5 daughters, ages 1 to 15, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So Mawa and her daughters arrived. Someone had made posters that said, "This is Karibu," which means welcome in Swahili. And they arrived, and for then 6 months, and now it's been close to a year, we're going to be celebrating next week with a kind of a picnic. So here I'd like to introduce Ngazi, and she was one of the core mentor team. So this is about 8 of us, 8 volunteers that rotated weekly visits, met with the family, and just kind of you get a feel for all the kind of fun things that have been happening and creating memories. So Ngazi.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia. And indeed, just hearing all those stories here has been very inspiring. I'm just going to share what we did. I was part of the core mentor group, which entailed those of us who could go visit with the family and just be a friend to them. So I'm going to expand on that. We had the opportunity, or even I would just say it was a privilege to be able to do this, because at first I was worried. I'm like, what? Every week we're going to be going to have to do this? But those initial 6 months were like, it was a joy, because we were thinking we're going to be coming to do some service. And instead, it was a case of us just seeing love personified. When Amao and her family will go visit them in their own homes, usually with coordination from our the lead person who was our core leader. We had like a roster, or even sometimes we would just freelance and say, hey, this needs to be done. So we're basically trying to be, as a group, the hands and feet of Jesus, and we're just trying to do that. Whatever was needed, if you needed to go for an appointment, and we were able to go there and just sit and be the person there. And indeed, like you mentioned, Linda, we had also the language barrier. We used everything possible. We used demonstrations. We used apps. We also were able to just communicate whatever. And love can be communicated in many ways. I just found out it's a universal language. Even sometimes when we go there and when we couldn't understand a language, just even a smile, we're coming there with, okay, we're this people just to sit with you. And we had the opportunity to do that. I would go sometimes with my daughter, Chi Chi, because since we knew that there were 5 girls, once we heard, she was like, Mom, I'm in. I'm going. I want to have new friends. I'm like, okay. And that was just very inspiring. And once we get to the house to visit, most times I was thrown to the curb. It was a case of the kids are like, yay, someone else new. And I became Chi Chi's mom, because as far as they were concerned, that was like the focal point. And just seeing the children open up, even in the various visits. I know and most times every week we shared what was going on. So it wasn't a case of you would go visit and we had a carryover. We were meeting every week and just be able to share what was the need. For example, it was a case of, hey, this curtain needs to be up, and we'll have one of the core members who will go and make something that will work, and some people were very ingenious to create things that were just going to work. And it was just and most times, even when we go there, like you mentioned, food was a way to welcome. So and whenever you come to visit, they want to offer food. Well, like and it was just very warming to know that even going through this whole trying time where they're trying to adjust to a culture or trying to adjust to so many things, they also felt a need to give, and it was just wonderful to experience. It was just very enriching. And for us as a people, I know that every time we go, we just saw giving being part of what was natural, and it was just a wonderful thing to experience. For the kids, even when we had other visit, when we had programs that were outdoors, like we visited the some visited with them to the zoo. There was also the time that was even at various parks. Sometimes when we come, just the park in front, when we just play in the park in the front of the, or in the building, they had like open space. But being able to just share love was, I felt it was a ministry of its own. So on a good day, maybe just being, if you feel like, oh, I'm into myself alone, but you're like, no, there's so much you can give without being clergy, without being the wealthiest person. But it was wonderful just to experience that. And most times, even, and at times, believe it or not, because you're the person who is like, they take you as family. One of I know that Ma recent times was having issues about, taking a job, but it just took one of us speaking with her and saying, hey, I've been there before. Because I also migrated to this country. So that first time when you're trying to meet with, but I didn't have the issue of having a language barrier, but I know what it feels like to just be in a new place. So, and just being able to reassure a person and walk that little path, just that little nudge made such a difference. It's like, I want to do this. So it's, there's nobody that is irrelevant. I just want to bring it that way. Even the smallest person, with or without an education, with or without know-how, once you have a pulse, you're good and you're able to make an impact. Like you had said, once, even if that starfish that was thrown back into the sea, you can, as in this, take it at everybody you meet. And this is an opportunity. I know this is a lifetime thing we end up having. And now that senior said we're going to have a 1 year celebration, I can't believe it's already a year. It feels like I've known them for a lifetime. That's how we feel. As in, most times my daughter will say, oh, can't we continue with this? Can't we continue with this? So we have to get like permission to know what going forward that is like. I just wanted to share that. And if anybody's having like reservations about being involved with people who are of a different culture, who are of a different from anywhere that is different from what you know, love is universal. And I think it's something that I just will encourage you to just put yourself out there. Find them maybe some, but we didn't have, as a group, we didn't have any negative feedback. So we didn't have any like trying to encroach. Each time we respected each other's spaces, and we will make sure that we were having like an appointment to see. We'll let them know whatever ways we could. And of course, those that were available made sure that once we are committed to something, we were able to do it. And they feel like whenever I know Mao and her family with even had nicknames for every one of us in one way or the other. There were names that they had just to identify, like Sister Bubbles. So whatever it was that you related with, it was just very encouraging as a people. I was wanted to share
Thank you
that.
so much, Ngozi. Oh my gosh, what great stories. Now, I have a few resources that we can provide to people in the future. But thank you so much. We will turn it over back now to the team.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I can attest to that too, the joy that we've received, and not only the joy with the family, but the joy in all the preparation and all the people that came in. I mean, it's really been a true walking in love for all of us. So now I do want to interject here that there are some people here, like we have Salvador Serna from the Illinois Community for Displaced Immigrants here. You can also address questions if you have any questions on case management and that sort of thing. And if there is anyone else in viewing that is from a not-for-profit, or somebody who would provide information or services, please share that in the chat. And because there may be questions that would be addressed to you also. We do anticipate having a resource sheet and resource information that you can receive after after the webinar is over, and I'll tell you later how to do that. But now I'm going to hand it over to Reverend Gary and Reverend Sandra.
Yes, I'll start out and I'll turn it over to Father Cox, Reverend Gary Cox. In my capacity as the chair of the Sanctuary Task Force, we received a referral from a pastor in Ecuador regarding this young man whose family, he and his family are from Cuba, and they were forced to leave Cuba and had been in Ecuador for several years. Unfortunately, Ecuador would not grant them asylum. And so when this young man arrived in the middle of December of this past year, my son and I went to pick him up at Midway. And he spent the remain from 2:45 to sometime in Sunday morning at my home with us. We were able to, I was able to make arrangements with a friend in Logan Square who put him up for 2 more days. And this is how we can use all these available resources to us, okay? Because through the Sanctuary Working Group that Brian referred to of the CRLN, we were able to place this young man in Salem Mission Homes, and see those Sanctuary Working Group, CRLN, covered his first month's rent there. My friend in Logan Square assisted him in becoming familiar with the neighborhood. And where the food pantries were, I took some time to show him how to use the CTA system here. And this young man is very well educated. He was working to get his master's in Cuba when they had to leave, and he is bilingual in English and Spanish. And so this makes a difference in terms of who we are working with, because folks who have a little bit more education are able to be a little bit more self-sufficient more quickly. And so St. John's, which is Linda Ragosa's church, covered his second month's rent at the Salem Mission Home and also donated towards his legal services. So, and ICDI with Salvador Serna and Rosa Hernandez have been providing him with case management, which means a stipend from the state, the medical card, and SNAP for food stamps. And so I'm going to turn over to Gary Cox to explain how he was able, as the pastor of Calvary Lutheran, to make arrangements for longer-term housing for this young man.
Thank you, Sandra, and thanks everyone for being part of this webinar. Yeah, Sandra described the initial stages. As in addition to that, I lived in Ecuador for a number of years, half a year as a student, and then I worked for a couple of years in the early 1990s. And so I actually knew this young man's pastor in Quito, in Ecuador, and so that maybe made this a little bit easier. But anyway, I was contacted by him explaining the situation. At the when I was first contacted, it was over a year ago. I thought, well, this is somebody in need, but I don't know what we could possibly do to help him at that time. However, things changed in less than a year. And again, I'm in addition to being vicar at Santa Teresa de Avila Episcopal Church, I'm also pastor at Calvary Lutheran Church, a church of the Metro Chicago Synod and the ELCA. Calvary had basically a sexton's apartment, which had originally a sexton living there, and his adult daughter. Unfortunately, the man who had served more or less as a sexton type of position died during the pandemic, and then his adult daughter unfortunately died less than 2 years later, last November, somewhat unexpectedly, or rather quickly. So anyway, this space became available November, December, or at least we knew of the space possibly being available on November, December last year. So I talked to our council and congregation vice president, which is in the Episcopal system, it's sort of like the senior warden. And I met with her and floated the idea with her of maybe opening this to an asylum seeker whom I knew indirectly through his pastor in Ecuador. And she was amenable to the idea. And so we then talked with the sort of mutual ministry committee or sort of executive committee, and then our whole council, which is in the Lutheran church is like a vestry in the Episcopal church. And somewhat to my surprise, there were certainly questions. People asked good questions, reasonable questions. But eventually, the council voted unanimously to extend the space, the sexton's apartment, as a temporary housing situation for this young man. And we agreed, they agreed to start on a 3-month trial basis, knowing that it would probably take longer than 3 months, but at least as a trial basis, just to make sure this would work out okay. And then subsequently extended it. And that was, we discussed it in January and February this year. He moved in late February. Again, our council vice president and I met with Salvador and Maria, some people from ICDI, and who explained, what they would do to help, everything, which they did, everything from helping to paint the space, the apartment. It needed some other minor repairs and upgrades that had not been done in many years that really needed to be done for it to be a welcoming space. So that took several weeks on and off, all by volunteers, mostly people within the congregation and a couple people from ICDI as well. And so the space was made welcoming and available by mid-February, roughly, of this year. And there's, still some minor repairs and things that were needed, but basically that he moved in then. And in addition to us, the congregation providing the space, and which is has a kitchen, has a living area, has a bedroom, has everything he needs. In addition to us providing him with these services, some people donated some other things that he needed for the first few weeks, especially. He was able, thanks to ICDI and mostly in some other groups, he was able to get assistance for food, for a CTA bus card, and for transportation and other things that he needed. Various of us from the church oriented him to certain things in the United States. I took him to the laundromat a couple of blocks away and explained how coin laundries work in the United States. I mean, things that we take for granted that, an asylum seeker or refugee from another country and part of the world would not have the background information about. So it was a blessing for him, but it was honestly a great blessing for us as well. He has integrated very well into our congregation. He attends worship quite faithfully and has volunteered, helping in the office, helping watering plants, helping cleaning. He's just so grateful for what he's been provided, and has really returned, I would say, multiple times over with enthusiasm, his services and his energy and ideas to the church as well. So it's really been a wonderful win-win for both the church and for him. And we got the good news very recently that he's been approved to get certain types of help, food assistance, SNAP type, food stamp type assistance, and assistance in those things as well. Even as his process, for waiting for the legal process to finish out over the next, hopefully, few or several months. And I don't know if there's anything else anybody wants to know, but it's been a great experience, and a little bit of work on our end, but far well worth it in service to God's call to welcome the stranger, and to be compassionate, and to provide shelter for those who would otherwise not have it. So it's really been a way to exercise our call as Christians, as well as have a relationship with somebody who has also helped us in many ways.
Thank you. Thank you. I know when we were first talking about this webinar on the task force, we were talking about, you know, what we wanted to happen was that we would be able to share stories to tell people that there are going to be challenges, there's going to be joys, and it's like you work through it all. But I mean, I see it as, you know, I have a family, I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren, and I had a husband, you know, and it just, everything is, that's life. It's challenges and joys, and it's how we work through that. So we haven't gotten a lot of questions so far, but I encourage anyone, you know, now's the time to raise your hand and ask a question. I'm wondering that if anybody, I know, Brian, one question came for you that is from Madeline McCarran. And Madeline, if you'd like to ask the question directly, you can. Or I can go ahead and read it. So the question is, could you expand on that first rocky relationship?
Yes, you know, people come with various different types of baggages, and this was a young woman, early 30s, with a 16-year-old son who was in high school here in Chicago. We got it, and we were just providing housing at that time, and all their support services was being provided by Wellington United Church of Christ. And I had a feeling that she just wasn't living the life that she expected to be living when she came to Chicago, that she was quite naive, and wound up being a bit angry at people, and she did not engage at all in the house or with us. Very little engagement with us, but there was her son was kind of close to my sons, and we enjoyed having him, and he was learning very good English, and he was such an intelligent kid. And eventually she got married and moved out, and they're living in Cincinnati right now, and I hear from them every couple times a year. And she has told us, "Oh, I was so bad. I did not appreciate what I had when we lived with you." And she was so sorry. And it's just the way things are. And her son is at University of Cincinnati and a sophomore. And they're both working. They have an apartment, and turned out to be a good story. I kind of was chuckling when Reverend Cox was talking, because we here wind up getting as much benefit as we are offering, and even more, I would say. We family that's with us now, they're always helping clean the house. They're always wanting to do stuff for us. We have them, we were able to get them into culinary school at the YWCA up in Evanston, and they're doing very well in that because they have good English skills, luckily. So they're able to do that. And so they probably will have some kind of careers once they get work permits. Wellington UCC has funded their legal application, so that's we hope that that's going to go through, and they'll get asylum and get work permits very soon. Asylum's been filed, and it takes years to get asylum in the U.S. It's a long process. But once you're actually filed, then you probably within 150 days after they accept your application for asylum, you're eligible to get work permit, which means that you can get a Social Security card and start to work. So that's always a hopeful sign. The young man that we're with is at Sullivan High School and doing very well, and plays a lot of sports. We love this family. We've had the family we had before was also very, very good to us. It was a family of 4 from Honduras that they had housing voucher from the city, but and so we were asked to take them on for a month. Well, that kind of thing, we found it takes quite a while to go through, and so it wound up being 4 months. In fact, we had both families living with us for a while, but that was good. These were a mother with a high school kid and a boy in 5th grade and a 3-year-old girl. And we see them and go over to their houses for birthday parties and go for dinner sometimes. And life goes on, and our circle has just become wider because of this. And we've met their friends, and their friends know us, and it's such a wonderful thing knowing that you're assisting and helping to accompany. I don't know if that answers your question, but we didn't regret having this first family at all. Kind of tried to understand what they were going through, but that was.
All right, I have a couple of more questions. And this one I'm going to refer to you, Salvador, if that's okay. It is obviously these people have experienced more or less trauma. How does that manifest in their stay, and how does the host handle that?
That is true. As people come to the United States, they come with a lot of trauma, just because every individual that comes into the United States, every asylum seeker has its own individual experience that forced them to come. Some of them are people who are being persecuted by the government. Others are people who are being persecuted by other groups. Some of them are being persecuted because of their religion, racial makeup. Many of them are victims of domestic violence. And so everyone has their own experience. The experience of traveling from their home country to the United States in itself is traumatic. So it's something that we really need to have a lot of patience. Does it manifest? Sometimes, not most of the time. And a lot of times it manifests when people are pretty quiet and they don't like to open up much because of the trauma. And many of them come with thinking that the problem is theirs and they don't try to share. What we have been doing at ICDI is we really are trying to provide a very holistic approach into assisting the newly arrived. Part of it is what I call accompaniment, and many of you are familiar with accompaniment, where you do not impose on the asylum seekers, but rather side by side you walk with them. As Brian mentioned, you walk with them to lead them into a process, because the first thing they have to learn is that they are finally in a safe and healthy environment. Despite what happened in the past, now they're in a safe and healthy environment. That takes a community. That takes people who are committed. Yes, in the beginning, it takes time, and it takes time from the host and the mentors and the volunteers. But as they start to feel much more comfortable, they open up and they become very independent. I know some of our speakers talk about, how they give back, how they become more independent as time goes by. And we do understand that sometimes we need to provide the social and emotional support, the professional social and emotional support for them to deal with this trauma. And that's one of the things that we try to do in ICDI, provide that. Sometimes, and I have had one person that I very, very much respect in this group, that I really, really appreciate her commitment, is Pastor Sandra Castillo. And there are times when I say, Sandra, I can't speak to this lady because I can't relate. I'm a man. So can you please be accompanying her through the process? And, it's about communication. It's about being able to open up and communicate as frank as possible when things arise.
Thank you. Thank you. There are a couple more. I'm going to go sort of in the order that they came. How long will it take for the people who come in right now to find whether they can get refugee status? And are they able to work in the meantime? So who would like to answer that?
Do you want me to answer? Yeah, go ahead, Sandra.
I'll do that. Salvador, you can add into it. But when the current administration ended Title 42, they also imposed basically what is an asylum ban. And so at this point, there are folks from 3 countries that get priority, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. But for other folks, and this is for the southern border, but if anyone now has to travel to the United States to ask for asylum by going through a different country, according to the asylum ban, they must ask for asylum in that country. They will not be allowed into the United States. And however, if you can afford to fly into the United States on a plane, then you're not entering another country. So then you can ask for asylum. Most of the folks that we are working with cannot afford to travel to the United States via plane. This does not apply to Canada. And so we are another big piece that has to be considered also in addition to accompaniment and housing is also advocacy. And so with it, we have it within our power to change government policy if we engage in the process and we advocate for folks like the folks that we're talking about now. Salvador, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you said it all. I would like to address it from a different perspective. Once an asylum seeker is giving the designation of asylum seeker, they have a year before they can apply for asylum. If they can apply before, it's even better, because and somebody mentioned it in this conversation. They will have 150 days after they apply, after they submit their asylum application, 150 days to be able to get their work permit. For them to get their work permit is very important, because once they receive once they have reached that threshold of 150 days, they can apply for a work permit. Once they have a work permit, they can apply for a Social Security. With a Social Security and their work permit, they can apply for a driver license or state ID. With their driver license, state ID, and Social Security number and work permit, they can apply for. They can work legally and immobilize. So for us, it's very important. Now, in terms of housing, how long does it take for a family to adjust? In the past, used to be for a year to a year and a half that we would request people to house a family, a refugee family or an individual. We have so far been so successful in the work that we do in integrating families into their community that it really takes about a year from the day they move in to the day they move out. But by then they're fully independent, and they have a job, and they have their social security number, and most of all, they're self-reliant, thanks to community support, of course, and thanks to the support that organizations like ICDI and supports that church groups provide to the family or the individual.
Thank you. Now, this one, I'd love to learn how the other speakers first got in touch with the asylum seekers they're hosting. How would a family or group get started hosting? So Sandra?
What we are doing with the Sanctuary Task Force is plugging into as many organizations and coalitions as possible. I'm grateful to Brian for inviting me to join the Sanctuary Working Group. The Sanctuary Working Group is a coalition of folks who have been doing this for maybe 3 or 4 years. And they consist of folks from different congregations, different denominations, and different faith traditions, as well as not-for-profits that can provide case management. And so we have received a referral from Sanctuary Working Group, and we're successful in matching a 9-member family from Venezuela with Trinity Episcopal Church in Highland Park. They have a team that comes from 3 different churches, as well as a local library, and they have provided 6 months of housing. Their case manager for this family has been a refugee 1, and now they're in a transition period. The family that is hosted by Linda came to us because they were stranded in Midway, and a friend, a colleague who's a Roman Catholic nun on the Southwest Side, called, and so we provided them with emergency housing, and through Sanctuary Working Group, we were able to cover those expenses. And thank God for St. John's Episcopal Church, and thank God for Linda, who stepped forward to provide them with longer term housing, which enabled ICDI then to provide case management. So there's all these different ways. Right now we have folks in police stations. And so if we have folks who can step up and contact for our diocese, the Sanctuary Working Group, or contact their churches, or contact the Sanctuary Working Group through ICD, through Sanctuary CRLN, we now have a waiting list of maybe about 20 families that are in need of emergency housing. So there are various ways, not-for-profits, churches, and diocesan groups like ours. And we can match folks up really quickly with families that are in need of housing.
I can share just a little bit. We used to be the interfaith community for detained immigrants, and now we're the Illinois community for displaced immigrants. And we were we had the name detained because we were the agency that we would get ICE, the immigration enforcement, would contact when a asylum seeker was going to be released from detention, and then they would call us to see we had housing available, and we could sponsor the immigrant, the newly arrived, and that's how we used to identify. Now it's through our network. It's working with the coalition. Is working with folks like Sandra, is working with people who pretty much call us and say, there's a few here in the meeting who say, we would like to see the possibility of partnering with ICDI to host an asylum seeker, or host, what can you do for us? I would encourage you, and I will leave, you can get a hold of me through Sandra. We had our Our program has 3 pillars. We do case management, we do housing, safe housing for immigrants, but we also we train our mentors and volunteers to be able to accompany folks through the process of integration. So we've been doing this for 17 years now. And so we pretty much know, what it requires for a safe and healthy transition into a community.
And if I could add, it does take a village, and it's the family that does the hosting has the most contact. Oh, has the most contact with the family. But I'm sorry, did I freeze?
Your video is frozen, but now we can hear your voice.
Okay. I'm gonna shut off my video.
Yeah, Brian, if you turn off the video, you should be able to get the audio.
The family that does the hosting has the most contact with the family and does the most for accompaniment. But it taking village.
Technical difficulties. Yeah. Hopefully, Brian will come back and continue. As we're talking about this, I want to let everybody know that we are going to be sending to the participants any resource sheets and information that we have. And also, if you would like more information on the Sanctuary Task Force or any of the organizations that have been present, or the work that we're all doing, you can send an email to Sandra Castillo. Sandra, are you going to put your email address in the chat? And she will get it to, she will either answer it or pass it on to the people who can answer it. I'm wondering myself, I know that we talk about how many asylum seekers from different countries, all are other human beings in our lives that have been coming from different parts of the world over the last several months. And we talk, when I know that I've felt when I've sent calls out by email that some people are looking at that and just, what can I do? What am I able to do? And I remember that we had lists from Chicago, from the task force, from different organizations about here's what we need. So that to me is in the realm of the challenges that we face, both as those maybe answering the calls, but also the people putting the calls out. So could anybody speak to that? And I mean, obviously we're not all superhumans, so what are the challenges and how do you address those? Not all the challenges, pick a few.
Craig, I would suggest that folks begin to be oriented to this ministry with small steps. Gary can talk about Santa Teresa and how they discovered the 20-some families around the corner in the police district station, and how they extended themselves to these folks. And I think that Cynthia she made a point about talking about preparation and whether or not the congregations had the ability to host. And so if you're not sure, you can take smaller steps and become more familiar with this ministry. We are not superheroes, but we are good Samaritans, and we put ourselves out there to welcome folks who may already have been totally vetted by the United States Commission on Refugees, in the case of asylum seekers, as Wendy and Brian were talking. They show up on our steps, and we learn who they are by hosting them and accompanying them. But there is a way that we can prepare ourselves to do this. We have now over 6,000 asylum seekers who need housing in Chicago. This coming summer, we're expecting more to be bused from Texas to Chicago. And all I can say to you is that in working with folks, they come here so that they can be established, so they can establish their families, so they can become part of this community, the Chicago metro community. And they want stability in their lives, and they want to be able to contribute to our community. And they're blessings to us. I don't know if that answers your question, or if anybody else would like to jump into this.
I don't really know if it's a one tiny question. It's a pretty big question.
To tell you the truth, I think for myself, I can't speak for Salvador or for Wendy O'Brien or for Linda, but in my experience, my greatest challenge is the fact that we have a government who is not obeying international and domestic law by allowing asylum seekers to come in, who are spending money on sending the armed forces to the border and operating for-profit detention centers, when our taxpayer money could be used to be able to establish systems where people can peaceably enter and claim asylum, where the government can be cooperating with churches and for not-for-profits, so that we can have a stable network of services, so that those families can have secure and safe housing as they begin the process. It's not so much the challenges that present themselves in hosting asylum seekers. It's the fact that we're trying to do this because our government is failing to act responsibly and justly and equitably. So that is where I am coming from.
Yes, and I mean, we all know that if nobody'd be coming here if there was not poverty, wars, illness, all the reasons that people leave their homes to come find another home. Does anybody have any more questions or comments for right now?
I would just like to add that someone else mentioned it already, but respecting each other's space. We respect each other's space here and treat each other with respect, and we don't really have any challenges that we can't overcome. The hardest thing for us is the language. But we get by with that, and we do. We go now. I'm going to church because they want to go to church, so I've become a more regular member. But we have some Spanish people, speaking people there, and after the service, we go to coffee hour, and there's always somebody who's there to translate for us. So it all works out. But yeah, mostly just treating each other with respect. That's all.
Yeah, and to Linda's point, there is no challenge that cannot be overcome. I can tell you that the majority of the houses that we manage and we provide case management, none of the volunteers, with very few exceptions, speak the language of the resident. And yet there's harmony among them, and there is one way or another they communicate with each other. It's true what they say. There's more than one way to communicate, and it's not a challenge. And to the previous question, I want to take it from a different perspective. I think that the biggest fear in housing asylum seekers is, am I sh- am I doing the right thing? What am I getting myself into? And I think that only by experiencing and speaking to others who have done it, you're gonna realize that it's a very gratifying and faith thing to do. There is no challenge that is bigger. It's the fear is within us. But once you experience the beauty of extending a helping hand, the experience brings so much with it, so many beautiful things with it, that it's just beyond, comprehension. So the biggest challenge is ourselves.
Yeah. I will say that I also am a member of the core mentorship team with St. Andrews, St. Matthew's Partnership. And we used to meet every Thursday night to talk, and now we don't meet quite as often, but I would say that there would be some moment in those meetings every time that there would be tears of joy of, talking about experiences that we had had. And yeah, I discovered that I speak French, and the family, some of them speak French, and so we could communicate that way. And it's just, you discover these things that I had to dredge up my French again, and that was great. So let's see. We are pretty much at time. I want to thank, all the people who have spoken and all the people who have participated in this webinar. I hope it has been as fulfilling and joyful for you as it has been for me. I must admit, I was a bit nervous at the beginning, and it's just a joy to be with you all. We are going to have a closing prayer if Brian is able to come back technically.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I hope this stays back. Thank you so much for having this conference. I really, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I learned a lot. I learned a lot from all of you. This is a responsive prayer, and the response is, we will walk with you. To the family seeking asylum and safety, we say to you, we will walk with you. To the migrant worker bringing food to our tables, we say to you, we will walk with you. To the asylum seeker looking for peace and justice, we say to you, we will walk with you. To the unaccompanied child traveling in a dangerous world, we say to you, we will walk with you. To families separated by a broken immigration system, we say to you, we will walk with you. Nobody should have to say, I lift up my eyes to the hills, from where will my help come? We say to you, we will walk with you. We are not alone. We are together on this journey. And for this we give thanks and make this promise. We say to you, we will walk with you. O source of justice, who is known by many names, open our eyes that we may see the immigrant and undocumented not as danger and threat, but as brothers and sisters whose dignity is tied to our own dignity and whose lack of freedom calls into question our own freedom. Let us not forget that your creation is founded on justice and that we have the moral responsibility to bring forth justice into our times. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you all. And see you next time. Have a peaceful night.